I've observed cadets engaging in drug trafficking, exploiting gravity controls, and confronting machinery in duels. Yet nothing could have prepared me for the day a human single-handedly defied Academy regulations. Indeed, in my 3 cycles at the Galactic Naval Academy, I've witnessed a myriad of absurdities. I've seen aspiring officers attempt to sneak fermented Antaran slime into their quarters. I once saw someone try to hack the gravity system during final exams, apparently finding academic rigor too conventional. There was even a Kendi cadet who, after a particularly harsh breakup, challenged a waste disposal unit to a solo fight. But absolutely nothing, and I mean nothing at all, could have anticipated what unfolded in Corridor 7 Delta on an otherwise unremarkable Tuesday afternoon. By the way, I'm Orinth, a third-year flight navigation student of the Avon class, Talrian subspecies. I possess feathers and a beak, the whole avian configuration. We're the sort of beings one might expect to be incubating eggs rather than piloting starships. Yet here we are, consistently surpassing expectations with each navigation chart. And no, before you ask, I cannot actually fly in the station's gravity. The universe, it seems, has a peculiar sense of humor. So, there I was, minding my own business, returning from advanced stellar cartography, which is essentially a sophisticated term for spending 3 hours learning about potentially catastrophic space debris. My talons clicked against the polished metallic floor. My datapad was tucked securely under one wing, and I was pondering whether the commissar's mysterious protein dish was worth the inevitable gastric distress. Just typical cadet musings, you understand. That's when I heard it. A sound that chills the blood of any civilized being, indicating severe distress somewhere nearby. A dull thud, another thud. The raw, meaty impact of flesh against metal, followed by a wet, gasping sound, the unmistakable cry for urgent assistance. I rounded the corner, and there it was, the scene that would alter everything. Poor, diminutive Pilnik was pinned against the wall, appearing almost like an organic, decorative piece. Now, to be frank, Pilnik wasn't exactly imposing. He stood perhaps 4 feet tall on a good day. His scales were an unfortunate shade of greenish-brown, giving him a perpetually sickly appearance, and his large, watery eyes seemed specifically designed to evoke every known protective instinct in the universe. A Praeson through and through. A sweet child, though. He always readily assisted others with their xenobiology assignments, never complained, and simply aspired to become a communications officer, conversing with extraterrestrials all day. The cruel irony of his current predicament was not lost on me. Restraining him was Throgast, a massive claw clutched around Pilnik's throat. Ah, Throgast. Where does one even begin with this individual? Imagine, if you will, 6 feet of chitinous nightmare fuel, an insectoid, kraken species, built like a mantis, a beetle, and a tank had been fused together, resulting in an entity with severe anger management issues. His exoskeleton gleamed under the corridor lights, a striking combination of black and dark green segmented armor that could likely deflect a plasma bolt. His compound eyes reflected the light in a way that unequivocally declared, "I take pleasure in inflicting pain, and I am exceptionally skilled at it." He wasn't alone, of course. Bullies, naturally, rarely are. They operate in predatory groups, knowing deep down they are inherently cowardly. To Throgast's left stood Vex, a Siluran with an excessive number of teeth and a deficit of cognitive function. A gelatinous species, semi-transparent, revealing disturbing internal organs that visibly pulsated. He was engaged in his characteristic motion, shifting his mass from one pseudopod to another, appearing eager, likely anticipating bloodshed. Vex invariably yearned for blood. On the right was Corm, a stout, four-armed being with rocky skin that resembled gravel meticulously affixed to a humanoid frame, a lithoid species. As unintelligent as a collection of space rocks, yet fiercely loyal to Throgast, akin to a trained attack animal. This delightful trio of evolutionary missteps had Pilnick cornered in one of the Academy's less frequented corridors. You know the type. Minimal foot traffic, inexplicably malfunctioning cameras, the ideal location for behavior unbecoming a galactic naval officer. This wasn't the first instance Throgast and his gleeful band of sociopaths had perpetrated such an act. Everyone knew. The instructors, command. But proving it? That was the challenge, wasn't it? No witnesses, no evidence, no complications. Pilnick whimpered, a high-pitched sound that caused my crest feathers to stand on end. Throgast was spouting something about territory, about understanding one's place. All the typical bully rhetoric that sounds profound to precisely no one with a functioning intellect. I should have intervened. A more virtuous individual would have intervened. Yet I remained frozen, calculating probabilities, running through potential scenarios. 3 against 1, and I would merely become victim number 2. Self-preservation isn't cowardice, I rationalized. It's logical. That's when I heard the footsteps. Not clicking, not scuttling, not the familiar slither thump of any recognized species. Just boots. Regular, rhythmic, purposeful boots, striking metal with the unwavering confidence of someone who commanded the corridor and everyone within it. She rounded the corner as if strolling through a park, not approaching an active, violent assault. Human. Terran. I instantly identified the species because, well, it's virtually mandatory at the Academy. They're the newcomers, recent inductees into the galactic community, and they arrive trailing a reputation that precedes them like a warning klaxon. This one was female. I believe humans operate on a binary gender system, and I'm still discerning the tells. She stood perhaps 5.5 feet tall, placing her at average height for her species. She possessed a lean build, though with discernible muscle definition beneath her academy uniform. Dark hair was secured back in what I would later learn was called a ponytail. Her skin exhibited that bronze hue some humans acquire, and her eyes were currently assessing the situation with a cold precision I had only ever witnessed in combat veterans. Her name was Rena. I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that she had paused, observed Throgast's hand around Pilnick's throat, then glanced at Vex and Corm, who were blocking any escape route, and then, and this is the crucial part, she smiled. Not a friendly smile, nor even a particularly joyful one. This was the smile of someone who had just discovered the exact justification they'd been seeking. "Hey," she articulated, her voice carrying the flat, almost melodic quality characteristic of human speech. "Are you planning on releasing him, or do I need to escalate this?" Throgast's head swiveled toward her, his compound eyes gleaming with amusement. He outweighed her by at least 80 pounds. His exoskeleton could repel blades. His claws could puncture hull plating. And here stood this soft-skinned, recently spacefaring primitive, issuing what could only be interpreted as a direct challenge. "Walk away, human," Throgast buzzed, his mandibles clicking with barely suppressed laughter. "This does not concern your kind. Unless you wish to join your friend here in learning about proper hierarchy." Rena tilted her head, and I swear on every star in the Antares cluster, she appeared utterly bored. "Hierarchy, right? Is that what we're calling it when three evolutionary rejects gang up on someone half their size? Because on Earth, we have a different word for it. Several words, actually. And most of them would get me reprimanded. She began to walk, not away, but towards them. Towards three beings who could theoretically dismember her without breaking a sweat. No hesitation, no fear response, nothing. Just this serene, resolute stride that indicated her decision was made. Consequences be damned. Vex shifted uneasily, his gelatinous mass rippling. "Throgast," he began. "Perhaps we should—" "Shut up," Throgast snapped. Then, addressing Rena, "Last warning, human." Rena halted approximately 6 feet away, rolled her shoulders as if preparing for exercise, and cracked her knuckles. The sound echoed in the corridor, sharp and disquieting. "No," she stated simply. "The last warning is yours. Let him go." Throgast laughed. He actually laughed. That was his initial error. His second error was not releasing Pilnik. What transpired next will be a subject of xenopsychology classes for the next decade, I guarantee it. Likely under a section titled, "Why You Should Never Underestimate Deathworlders," or perhaps, "How Earth Primates Will Absolutely Ruin Your Day." Throgast made the monumentally foolish decision to reach for Rena with his free claw, the one not currently choking the life out of Pilnik. He was swift, I'll grant him that. Kraken reflexes are not to be underestimated. His claw darted out like a striking serpent, aimed directly at her shoulder. He was likely planning to grab her and introduce her face to the nearest wall. Rena moved, not away, but into the attack. She stepped inside his reach, which, apparently, is what humans do when any sane species would retreat, and she executed a maneuver with her hands that I couldn't quite follow. One moment, Throgast's claw was advancing. The next, she had redirected it, twisting it at an angle that caused my own joints to ache in empathy, and Throgast stumbled forward, off balance, his grip on Pilnik loosening. Pilnik dropped to the floor, gasping and scrambling away on all fours. "Smart kid." Throgast recovered faster than I anticipated, spinning to confront Rena with both claws raised now, mandibles spread wide, in a threat display that would have sent most species fleeing for the nearest panic button. "You just made the worst mistake of your short life, human." Yeah, big scary bug man. I'm practically shaking," Rena retorted, her tone so arid it could have desiccated a water planet. "Are you going to monologue, or are we doing this?" Corm, brilliant strategist that he was, decided this was his moment to distinguish himself. All four arms swung in from Rena's right, rocky fists like asteroid strikes. She deftly evaded the initial 2 strikes, swayed to avoid the third, and the fourth? That one she snared. She, a mere 130-pound human, intercepted a lithoid's punch mid-swing. I watched her entire body pivot, leveraging his own force against him. Kororum flew past her, colliding with Vex, and both collapsed into a tangled heap of limbs and protoplasm. "Did she just?" someone whispered behind me. A nascent crowd of cadets, drawn by the ruckus like moths to a plasma flame, forming around us. "She just threw Kororum," another confirmed, their voice a mix of awe and terror. Throgast charged then, abandoning pretense and posturing. He assailed her with absolute fury, claws raking, mandibles snapping. His entire being was a weapon, honed by eons of predatory evolution. And Rena, that audacious Earthborn lunatic, did not attempt to block. She slipped. That is the only fitting word. She flowed between his attacks like water, like gravity itself, as if she could foresee the future and simply chose not to be where his blows landed. Then she struck him, not with her fists, those came later. First, she delivered an elbow, driving it with surgical precision into the joint connecting his thorax and abdomen. Throgast emitted a sound I had never heard a lithoid produce before, high-pitched and choked, and his exoskeleton, his supposedly impenetrable armor, fissured. Just a tiny crack, just enough. "Oh, that's a weak point," Rena observed casually, as if remarking on an interesting cloud formation. "Good to know." Vex had disentangled himself from beneath Corum and now flowed towards Rena, amorphous and unpredictable. Silurians are the stuff of nightmares for precisely this reason. No bones, no discernible structure, just enraged, sentient jelly with teeth. He enveloped her leg, his acidic surface beginning to erode her uniform's fabric. Rena glanced down at him, then back up at Throgast, who was recovering from the elbow strike, and sighed. "Seriously? The acid thing? That's your big move?" She reached down, and I will forever be baffled by the physics of it. She plunged her hand into Vex's gelatinous mass, finding something, I know not what, something vital, and squeezed. Vex emitted a sound akin to a deflating air bladder and released her leg, recoiling and quivering. She touched my neural cluster," he gurgled, his voice trembling. "She shouldn't be able to find it. Shouldn't be able to—" "Anatomy is anatomy," Rena stated, shaking her leg out. Her pants were faintly smoking, yet she seemed undisturbed. "You have vulnerable bits. I have hands. Mathematics works itself out." The crowd swelled. I could hear datapads recording, voices murmuring in a dozen different tongues. Someone was undoubtedly going to be expelled for this. Probably everyone. Possibly even the witnesses. Carorum lunged at her again, because apparently learning from experience is not a lithoid forte. This time, Rena did not evade. She braced her feet, and when his first punch connected, she met it fist to fist, flesh and bone against living rock. The impact was catastrophic. I was absolutely convinced I had just witnessed a human shatter every bone in her hand. Carorum recoiled, cradling his fist, tiny cracks spreading like spiderwebs across his rocky knuckles. Rena flexed her fingers, winced slightly, and grinned. "Ow! Okay, stupid, but worth it for the look on your face." "What is she made of?" someone in the crowd breathed. "Spite and calcium deficiency, apparently," I muttered back, because honestly, what else could explain this? Throgast had regrouped, and now he was genuinely enraged. Not playful, not cool, but truly furious. He charged her once more, and this time there was no finesse. Just raw aggression, powerful blows intended to overwhelm through sheer force. And Rena matched him, strike for strike. She blocked with her forearms, countered with her fists, knees, elbows, even her forehead at one point, which cracked against his mandible and sent him reeling. She fought like someone schooled in environments where losing meant not rising again, where rules were mere suggestions and survival was the sole determinant of victory. The skirmish concluded not with a dramatic knockout, but with the sharp, authoritative wail of security klaxons. Nothing deflates a good brawl quite like the arrival of individuals armed with stun batons and the authority to consign everyone involved to detention until the heat death of the universe. Commander Yelix arrived with 6 security officers, all armed, all looking as if they'd prefer to be literally anywhere else. Yelix was Zenturi, a species renowned for their rigid adherence to protocol and their utter absence of anything resembling a sense of humor. 8 feet tall, with crystalline skin that refracted light in disconcerting ways, and a voice that sounded like glaciers grinding together, she surveyed the scene with the enthusiasm of someone discovering a sewage leak in their personal quarters. "Explain," she intoned, the single word carrying enough gravitas to crush a small moon. Throgast, to his credit, quickly regained his composure. His exoskeleton was fractured in 3 places. One claw dangled at an odd angle, and he was leaking some blue ichor that I was fairly certain was meant to remain internal. Yet he straightened up, mandibles clicking in what passed for a strained smile, and pointed one trembling claw at Rena. "Unprovoked assault, Commander," he buzzed, his voice strained but steady. "I was merely walking with my colleagues when this human attacked us without warning. I defended myself, as was my right under station protocol." Oh, he was good. I had to admit it. The lie rolled off his mandibles as smoothly as silk, delivered with precisely the right blend of injured innocence and righteous indignation. Vex and Corum nodded enthusiastically, Vex's gelatinous mass rippling in agreement, Corum's rocky face molded into something approximating concern. Commander Yalix's crystalline eyes shifted to Rena, who stood there with her arms crossed, uniform torn, one pant leg still faintly smoking from Vex's acid, knuckles bleeding, and an expression that suggested she was calculating the precise extent of her predicament and had decided it was entirely justified. "Cadet Kovac," Yalix stated, her tone glacial even by her species standards, "do you have anything to say in your defense?" Rena looked at Throgast, then at Vex and Corum, then back at the commander. When she spoke, her voice was calm, measured, and absolutely dripping with a contempt that could strip paint off a bulkhead. "Yes, Commander. I have several things to say, actually. First, Throgast's version of events is what we call on Earth a lie. A big one. The kind that requires either incredible stupidity or incredible arrogance to attempt. Given present company, I'm leaning toward both." Throgast's mandibles clicked angrily. "You dare!" "I am not done talking," Rena interrupted, not even glancing at him. "Second, when I arrived in Corridor 7 Delta approximately 8 minutes ago, Throgast had Cadet Pilnik pinned against the wall by his throat. Vex and Corum were blocking his escape routes. This was not a casual encounter. This was premeditated assault. 3rd offense this month, if station records are accurate, which they should be, unless someone has been deleting files. She paused, allowing that to sink in. I watched Commander Yalix's expression, or what passed for an expression on a crystalline face, subtly shift. "Interesting. Where is Cadet Pilnik now?" Yalix inquired, her voice carefully neutral. Pilnik, bless his terrified little heart, poked his head out from behind a support beam where he had been hiding. He looked as if he wished to melt into the floor and cease to exist. "Here, Commander," he squeaked. "She's telling the truth. They were... Throgast was... I couldn't breathe, and she..." His voice broke, and he began to cry. Not loud, dramatic sobs, but quiet tears streaming down his scaled face, the kind that stem from a mixture of relief and terror, from the sudden realization that you almost died, and a stranger had risked everything to save you. Rena's expression softened for a fleeting moment, a crack in her armor, before settling back into defiant neutrality. I intervened because no one else was going to. I used appropriate force to stop an assault in progress. If that violates station protocol, then your protocol is garbage, and someone should probably rewrite it. The corridor fell into an absolute silence. You do not address a commanding officer in such a manner. You simply do not. It is career suicide, social suicide, possibly even actual suicide, depending on the commander's disposition. I watched several cadets in the crowd involuntarily step backward, as if her insubordination might be contagious. Commander Yalix stared at Rena for what felt like an eternity. Then she turned to her security officers. "Detain Throgast, Vex, and Coram. Medical examination for Cadet Pilnik. Full corridor security footage review." And yes, Cadet Kovac, I am aware files have been deleted. We have backups. She turned back to Rena. "You will come with me. We have much to discuss about appropriate use of force and proper channels for reporting violations." "Looking forward to it," Rena said flatly, holding out her wrists as if expecting restraints. Yelix's crystalline face performed what might have been the Zenturi equivalent of a smile. "That will not be necessary. Walk with me, Cadet. And someone, get medical down here before Throgast leaks out completely. The cleaning drones despise biological fluids." I should not have been in that interrogation room. Technically, I was there as a witness, having observed the tail end of the incident. But truly, I believe Commander Yelix simply desired an audience for what was about to unfold. The Zenturi possess a particular reverence for teaching moments, for ensuring that lessons are absorbed by the widest possible audience. Efficiency through education, or some similarly bureaucratic motto. The room was standard issue. With metal walls surrounding us, we sat on uncomfortable chairs, clearly designed by someone who harbored a dislike for proper posture, at a table that had certainly seen better days. Rena sat opposite me, looking remarkably composed, given she had just committed what could technically be described as an assault on 3 fellow cadets. Her knuckles were now bandaged, courtesy of a medical technician who had mumbled something about human bone density being offensively excessive. Commander Yelix, meanwhile, was across from her, a data pad in hand, her crystalline fingers tapping a rhythm that suggested either deep contemplation or an effort to suppress amusement. I stood in the corner, attempting to be inconspicuous, a challenge when one possesses vibrant plumage and a tendency to shed feathers when anxious. Feathers were everywhere. "Very professional, Detach," Yelix began, her voice formal. "In your own words, explain your actions and the reasoning behind them." Rena leaned back, her chair groaning dramatically under the shift in her weight. "Saw a kid getting choked out by someone twice his size. Intervened. Not complicated. But you understand there are proper channels," Yelix continued. "Security protocols, reporting procedures, conflict resolution, mediation. You could have contacted station security, filed a formal complaint, allowed the system to address the situation." Rena's expression flattened. "Right. The system. The same system that has let Throgast get away with this garbage for how long exactly? 3 months? 6? How many cadets has he hospitalized while everyone was filling out the proper forms?" She leaned forward, her tone sharpening. "Commander, I mean no disrespect to you personally, but your system is broken. It protects bullies who know how to work the bureaucracy and leaves victims out to dry." Yelix's fingers stopped tapping. "That is a serious accusation." "It is a serious problem," Rena shot back. "On Earth, we learned something a long time ago. You cannot reason with bullies. You cannot committee them into being decent people. You cannot file paperwork that makes them suddenly develop empathy. The only language they understand is consequences, immediate and physical. You make it hurt more to be a bully than to be a decent person. And suddenly, remarkably, they find their inner morality." I shifted uneasily, my talons clicking on the floor. This was heresy, pure and simple. The entire galactic community was founded on principles of diplomatic resolution, peaceful conflict management, and measured responses through appropriate channels. What she was describing was, well, barbaric, primitive, and very, very human. "So your solution," Yelik said slowly, "is violence." "My solution is a proportional response," Rena corrected. "Throgast was using violence. I met violence with violence. He stops, I stop. Simple transaction. Nobody died. The victim is safe. And 3 bullies just learned a valuable lesson about prey that bites back." "But in a civilized society," Yelik began. "Civilized?" Rena interrupted, then laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "Commander, let me tell you something about civilization. Real civilization is not about having fancy protocols and 17-step reporting procedures. Real civilization is measured by how you treat your most vulnerable members. A society that lets the strong prey on the weak because stopping it would be impolite or improper or against proper procedure, that is not civilized. That is just polite barbarism with better paperwork." A profound silence followed. I could hear my own heartbeat, a loud triple-time rhythm in my ears. This human, this Earthborn newcomer who had been in the galactic community for barely a fraction of a cycle, had just labeled thousands of years of carefully constructed social order polite barbarism. The worst part was, she might have had a point. Commander Yelik set down her datapad. Her crystalline face remained impassive, but her voice, when she spoke, conveyed something I had never heard from her before: uncertainty. "Your file indicates you have prior military experience. Earth Armed Forces, Infantry Division. You have seen combat." "Yes, ma'am." "Did you enjoy what happened today? The fight?" Rena met her eyes steadily. "No, Commander, I did not. I do not enjoy hurting people, but I would do it again without hesitation, because that kid, Pilnik, he deserves to walk these corridors without fear. Everyone does. And if your system cannot guarantee that, then someone has to." The aftermath of what the cadet population immediately dubbed the Corridor 7 incident was, to put it mildly, spectacular. Within 48 hours, 3 significant events occurred that fundamentally transformed life at the Galactic Naval Academy, and I witnessed all of them firsthand. Firstly, Throgast, Vex, and Korm were expelled. Not suspended, not reprimanded, not given a stern talking to and sent on their way. Expelled. Gone. Their families were notified, their belongings packed, and they were escorted off-station by security, with the kind of efficiency typically reserved for biological hazards. It turned out that when Commander Yelik reviewed those backup security files, she uncovered enough evidence to charge them with 17 separate counts of assault, intimidation, and conduct unbecoming. 17. In 3 months, the system hadn't been broken. It had been systematically ignored. And now, someone was actually paying attention. Secondly, and this is where it gets interesting, the Academy convened an emergency session to review its conflict resolution policies. I attended because witness testimony was apparently required, and I observed a room full of senior officers and department heads debate for 6 straight hours about whether Rena's actions constituted justified intervention or criminal assault. The vote was closer than it should have been, but ultimately they settled on justifiable defense of another cadet under imminent threat. She received a formal reprimand for not following proper reporting channels, which would remain on her record, but in the same breath, a commendation for exemplary courage and protection of fellow cadets. Galactic bureaucracy at its finest. Punish and praise simultaneously so no one can complain about bias. But the third thing was what truly mattered. New protocols were implemented. Mandatory bystander intervention training. Anonymous reporting systems with guaranteed follow-up within 6 hours. Security reviews of all assault claims from the past 2 years. And my personal favorite, a new policy stating that physical intervention to prevent immediate harm would be evaluated based on threat level and proportionality, rather than automatically classified as assault. They called it the Kovac Protocol. Though Rena herself rolled her eyes so hard at that name, I thought they might achieve escape velocity. "They named a rule after me for breaking rules," she remarked when I encountered her in the commissary 3 days later. "Earth logic would call that ironic. What does your species call it?" "Stupid," I replied, settling across from her with my tray of nutritional paste. "We call it stupid, but effectively stupid, so I suppose that counts for something." She was eating something that looked like it had died twice and been reanimated out of spite. Human food is, I have learned, an acquired taste I have no intention of acquiring. "How is Pilnik doing?" she asked, poking at her meal with a fork. "Better. He actually came to class yesterday, first time in 2 weeks." I tilted my head, a gesture of curiosity among my people. "He asked about you, wanted to know how to thank you properly." Rena looked uncomfortable, which was fascinating. This was the same human who had faced down 3 opponents without blinking, and genuine gratitude made her squirm. "He doesn't need to thank me. Anyone would have done the same." "Except they didn't," I pointed out. "I didn't. I stood there and calculated risks and decided my safety was more important than his life. You did the opposite. That's not normal, Rena Kovac." "That is exceptional, and also possibly insane, but mostly exceptional." She was quiet for a moment, pushing food around her plate. When she spoke, her voice was softer than I had ever heard it. "On Earth, we have this saying, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. I didn't come halfway across the galaxy to do nothing while someone got hurt." "That's not why I'm here." "Why are you here?" I asked, because I was curious, and also because she seemed like she might actually answer. She smiled, small and genuine. "To see what's out here. To meet people, all kinds of people, and figure out where humans fit in this big, weird, wonderful universe. And maybe, if I'm lucky, to make it a little bit better than I found it." A week later, I saw Pilnik walking through Corridor 7 Delta, head held high, no fear in his eyes. 3 other cadets were with him, smaller species, the kind that usually clung to shadows and avoided attention. They were laughing about something, their voices echoing off the metal walls, claiming space that had been denied to them through intimidation and violence. Rena wasn't with them. She didn't need to be. Her presence was there anyway, in their confidence, in their willingness to exist without apology. I thought about what she had said, about making things better, about how humans approached problems, not with committees and protocols, but with direct action and consequences. It was messy, it was uncomfortable, and it absolutely terrified the carefully structured order we had built over millennia. It also worked. That night, I began writing my xenopsychology thesis. The title? Deathworld Ethics and the Failure of Civilized Passivity, a Comparative Study. My advisor said it was too controversial. I told her that was exactly the point. Humans, I was learning, have this irritating habit of being right about things we wish they were wrong about. They scrutinize our arrangements, our delicately poised societal frameworks, our 10 millennia of progressive diplomacy, and their query is, indeed, does this genuinely aid individuals, or merely assuage your conscience for not offering assistance? Rena confronted 3 tormentors and, by sheer happenstance, initiated a radical shift in scholastic regulations. She's likely unaware of the profound impact she made. She probably believes her actions were simply what anyone would, what anyone ought to do. That, precisely, is the most disquieting aspect of humanity. They sincerely hold that imperiling everything for the sake of an unfamiliar individual is merely fundamental propriety. They perceive bravery as an inherent trait. When confronted with inequity, their primary impulse isn't to submit documentation, but to stand between the aggrieved and the menace, irrespective of repercussions. The cosmos was unprepared for humanity. I often ponder if we ever will be. Yet perhaps, just perhaps, that is precisely what was required. Also, someone should kindly inform Human Command to cease dispatching individuals who resolve dilemmas with fisticuffs. My stress levels are at their peak, and I'm rapidly approaching the end of my rope.